Hello and welcome back to the Discovery Garden webinar series. Today's webinar highlights work done at the University of Pittsburgh to extend the Islandora framework. As always, we are recording the webinar and we'll send out a link to access it later today. We'll put it up on YouTube. And we have a guest speaker today, so we have most of people's microphones muted to reduce ambient noise. So you will know if your mic is muted if the microphone icon displays in red. So that's a good sign. And I'll review that in a moment. So we want to mute everyone's mic to reduce ambient noise so our guest speaker can be heard. My name is Erin Tripp. I'll be hosting today's webinar, and I'm the Business Development Manager at Discovery Garden. I'm a librarian, and I've been working at Discovery Garden since 2011. I started first as a project manager and then transitioned to business development. In that time, I have worked on more than 40 digital curation or digital repository projects, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. Now, before we get into the good stuff, I do have some housekeeping. So this is just a review of how to mute your microphone. As I mentioned, most of you already have your microphone muted. It's a good sign when the mic icon is red. It means that you cannot be heard. One other order of housekeeping is how to ask questions. There is a speech bubble icon in the Join Me menu or navigation menu. If you click on that speech bubble, a comments section will appear and you can type in a question. And we'll be reviewing and responding to questions at the end of the webinar content. So that's it for the housekeeping. Let's move on. So for today's webinar, as always, we're going to start with an Islandora overview, and that's going to be particularly helpful for people who are new to Islandora. We'll also talk very briefly about Discovery Garden. In addition to that, I'm going to introduce you to our guest speaker named Brian Gillingham from the University of Pittsburgh. And he's going to lead us through some examples of how he has extended the Islandora framework. As mentioned before, we will be answering questions from participants. You can type in your questions and they'll be reviewed and responded to at the end of the webinar content. And before I move on, just another quick reminder to mute your microphone. If the microphone icon is red on your display, that means it's muted. So as I mentioned, we always start with a bit of an overview of Islandora. It's really important for people who are new to the framework to get a bit of a quick crash course in what Islandora is. So Islandora, it's a open source technology stack. It's also referred to as a framework, and it consists of 3 core components. Those components are Drupal, Apache Solr, and Fedora Commons. The stack also includes many utility components and dependencies. Islandora is a very large open source software stack because it includes many different applications. And when we talk about Islandora, we can also think about integration. Because Islandora is a stack or a framework of many different applications and components, it is essentially a wonderful system for integrating third-party tools or external tools. So now we're going to go through a bit of a review of each of the core components, and we're going to start with Drupal. Many of you are likely familiar with Drupal. It is a leading open source content management system. It has over 30,000 user-contributed modules from almost 100,000 active community members. That's a lot of members. For those of you who are familiar with open source software, you'll know that active community is vital to the success of a project, and that can be said for Drupal. There are so many people invested in using Drupal, and that leads to ongoing development and success and sustainability. In the Islandora context, Drupal serves as the presentation layer. So it's how we create a website and it's how we expose our digital content to the web. In addition to that, we also use Drupal for collaboration. It has a really good framework for users, roles, and permissions, and we leverage that to create workflows for people who interact with digital content in the repository. It can also be said that Islandora is in essence a suite of Drupal modules. So it's a suite of Drupal modules that just help us build digital repositories on top of Fedora. And these modules make it possible to build, populate, and configure a digital repository in most instances without the aid of a developer. Next is a quick overview of Solr. It's the discovery or search layer in Islandora, and it's an incredibly powerful and flexible tool. It's used in some of the most heavily trafficked websites and applications worldwide. For example, if any of you have used Netflix, its search and discovery layer is powered by Solr. In addition, the government White House, their search applications on their website, also powered by Solr. So many organizations and institutions worldwide use Solr because it's super capable. It has full text searching, it has search faceting and filtering, it's highly scalable and fault tolerant, and it provides near real-time indexing. So it's a wonderful tool that we leverage to make discovery easier on the repository side. And the final core component that we'll go through is Fedora Commons. It's the layer that stores and preserves content, and it's purpose-built for data preservation and long-term data accessibility. So it really is, excuse me, it really is one of the more important components of Islandora because it's where we store all of our descriptive metadata, technical metadata, all of the binary files, derivatives, and it's important that it stores this content in ways that are easy to move to future systems down the road. So there's no barrier to access your data in the future. So Fedora has some very important key features like auditing and fixity checks, support for RDF XML, that's how we express relationships among digital objects in the repository. It can scale up to many millions of objects, and it has support for virtually any file type. And as I just mentioned, it is built for interoperability. You can export or migrate your data in a format that you choose, that it can be stored elsewhere. So in summary, these three core components do make up the meat and potatoes of what Islandora is, but it is also, Islandora also includes, of course, many other components, dependencies, and other applications. So we do call it a framework or a stack because it includes many different components. Also worth noting that Islandora is implemented by organizations all over the world. I believe there are installations of Islandora on 5 continents. Some of these instances are customized in order to meet specific functional requirements, and some organizations use Islandora without customization. They use it right out of the box. So Islandora is a flexible framework for building digital repositories. And just a quick note about Discovery Garden. So that's the company that Adam and I work for. Discovery Garden is a service provider for Islandora, and we've worked to remove barriers to using open source software technology like Islandora. So that's where we see our role in the Islandora ecosystem or community. We launched our company in 2010, and we're a partner in the Islandora Foundation. The foundation is a nonprofit entity that fosters the Islandora code. And since we've launched, we've contributed over 90% of the Islandora code base, which we've written here at Discovery Garden on behalf of our many customers. We offer many services, which I won't get into today, but there is a link on the screen that you can follow and browse at your leisure. So it's my pleasure now to segue into our guest speaker content with an introduction of Brian Gillingham. So Brian is an application developer at the University of Pittsburgh Library System. Brian's experience dates back to the 70s when he wrote his first program at the age of 9. It was the start of a decades-long passion for developing in Windows, Android, and web-based frameworks such as PHP. Brian's worked at several tech startups, financial companies, and other companies. In today's webinar, Brian will talk about his work extending the Islandora framework. Over the past 10 months, Brian has developed 20 new modules for the University of Pittsburgh's Islandora repository. Each module provides a solution to a specific functional requirement developed by stakeholders at the library. And some of those modules may be contributed back to the community. Today, we only have time to discuss 3 of those modules, but we'll be talking to Brian about his experience developing code in the Islandora framework. Welcome to you, Brian.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
So, Brian, we're going to start talking about a quick overview of what you guys have going on at the University of Pittsburgh. So, can you tell me a little bit about your repository?
Sure. At the University of Pittsburgh, I think around 2010, we decided to start using Islandora to replace some of our legacy websites, which were proprietary or otherwise to host the digital content that we had. And our installation here at the University of Pittsburgh, it features a multi-site implementation where we have nearly 1.5 million page objects, tens of thousands of high-resolution images, finding aids, manuscripts, maps, a lot of books, and we are working on ingesting newspapers, some audio content, video content, and Islandora is just the perfect framework to put this together to serve it up to our users. With our multi-site implementation, we can have one object appear on multiple websites with just a single configuration. So there's no duplication of data there. That's a fairly simple way of saying how it all works here.
Wonderful. And we're going to get into some more detailed use cases actually right now, because we're going to start talking by talking about this alpha pagination module. So you showed me this the other day, and it's really cool. And it's one of these modules that you've created over the last 10 months. So can you tell me a little bit about why it was needed and why you started to work on it?
Yeah, our head of archive services, he would repeatedly tell me that our list of collections needs to have alphabetical pagination because you see this feature, other websites might have this feature. And many times we would be adding collections. So if he was coming to this collection, the Kingsley Association records, it might be on page 4, but a couple months later, it's going to be on page 5. And so it's just a no-brainer sort of that he wanted a way to be able to just click on the letter K and go straight to the collection that he needed.
So how does this work from a technical perspective? How is this list or this pagination generated?
I borrowed some of the source code comes from the standard Drupal module by the same name, alpha pagination, but I've forked that code so that I could make it talk to our Solar collections, a little bit of just hardwiring the code so that it will work within our collections view. But this is just a standard Drupal view, which is using Islandora Solar, and it's configured to show each object that is a collection object and to display the title and the description and the contributor as well as the thumbnail. So it's a replacement for the standard pagination that you would have in any view control. I can take you in to show you that now, just briefly if I can.
Sure, I'll pass you the presenter role. That's one thing I forgot to do.
So on the administrative side, you would be able to go in to the, where is it here? This is the standard Drupal view editor. So this defines the collection that you would see there. And with every collection, it standardly would allow you to set up pagination. But this module allows you to have this alpha pagination control where you can turn off the numeric pagination or use the alpha pagination. And all this alpha pagination does is it queries all of the objects that meet the standards of the filter criteria, and it gets the first letter of each and then simply makes a link for each one of those. So all of these letters are represented. You could see the number 1, but that corresponds to this one collection. It starts with the number 1. And it just runs a query on the back end where it has the letter S as pretty much the query for the collection name starts with an S asterisk, and then it returns these records. So it's pretty simple from my perspective, but it's very useful, and I think that it's something that others could definitely extend upon or just implement, drop it in and start using it.
Absolutely. I remember listening to a LIDA technology panel a couple of years ago and saying that we should be doing whatever we can to make browsing more intuitive. So I think this is a wonderful module to that end. Really great. And so you mentioned a little bit that this isn't, the configuration of this module is not very complex. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, there's nothing really to configure within the module. You just basically tell it to output the pagination control on the view. It is able to communicate with the view and see what the filter is, so it basically knows which records would be queried. And right now, I don't have an idea for what else might be configurable, but I'm sure that I can't think of everything. Somebody may have an idea that would make a lot of sense to have that as a configuration. And certainly, it could be, improved upon.
Right. And I think that's the beauty as well of community development. So time will tell, right? Always.
And I always think that sometimes software is never done. It can always change a little bit with the times. The times change, or the needs change, or somebody just has a new idea, and that's something that you can't think of at the outset sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always like to describe our projects as living projects. They're always changing. That's very succinct. All right. So next, we wanted to talk about this new module called the Data Stream File Namer. And so it's another module that you've been working on. Can you tell us about what it does and who uses it and why they use it?
Sure. Whenever a user is within the admin management side of things, they will frequently go into the Manage screen to look at the data streams, and to download the data streams onto their local hard drive is frequently kind of useful. You want to take the mods file and run it through a local program, or do something with the images or something like this. And out of the box, the normal file name would just be the label and the MIME type extension, the file extension. So that would just lead to potentially a lot of files being named the same. So you would get mods1.xml and mods2.xml, and your operating system would just give you the next number. So you would have no way of really knowing that this specific mods file was downloaded with respect to this object or that data stream within the object. This gives you a way to set up what the file name will be when it is downloaded. And I can show you the configuration for that. Do I have control, Aaron? Let me see.
I'll pass that to you right now. Yeah, I think it'd be really good to see how that can be configured. There we go.
Okay. So like I said, let me just touch on the fact that we've got the multiple website implementation, and one of the websites is set up so that we have the ability to edit the data, and this is our staff side. The other websites really don't let you edit the data, so you can't manage the data streams except for within this one website. So this is our website where we can actually administer and manage these objects. But here's the simple configuration for it. It employs Drupal's powerful token system to let you set up a file name that follows a specific formula. So given that every file name is taken from a data stream when you're downloading it, it's able to inspect the specific data stream and its parent Fedora object, and then create a file name from some of the properties of that file name, from those objects. So for example, if you really wanted to also include the name of the label of the object at the beginning of it, we could add that to the front and add a couple dashes or whatever you want here. But whatever's in between the brackets are the tokens, just as Drupal works with other tokens. And you can even include the other system tokens. Sometimes it might be really smart to add the date at the beginning so that they're sortable or something like that. But when you save the configuration, this would be the file name of an object when I go to download it. Now, for example, if I go to an object to download, let me just navigate to one here. So whenever I click download before, this file would be named, well, that's maybe a bad example, external relations.xml. But if I download it now, it will have the date, timestamp, the other properties that I set there. So I could show this in a folder. I have the long date plus the name of the object plus the data stream ID after 2 dashes. There's an underscore and the label of the data stream. So then it's just a really helpful way to create the name that you would want, and you wouldn't be able to mix up what your data streams were. After you've downloaded them, you would know which one was which. And that's pretty much it. It's just that one simple configuration, and then it automatically takes effect when you download them. So I would download the Mets. It would have --Mets instead of --. You can see the Mets and the rel text.
That's wonderful. It's actually a tool. When I first saw it, I thought immediately of a couple of organizations that would absolutely love it for their repository administrators. You know, when you're managing content, there are occasions when you need to replace a data stream with an updated data stream, let's say, or from a different source or something like that. So this type of functionality would really come in handy, I think, for a lot of organizations. That's great.
Yes, and if I could also mention that I've got another module that I've been working on that plays with this module very well, I think, but you could set up this naming pattern, but it's a module to be able to export all of the data specific data streams from a set of objects. And the set of objects would be defined by all of the objects that belong to a collection, or all of the objects that belong to a model type, or given a Solr query, you could then return all of the specific data streams from that module as well. But it could be potentially hooked into this module to say, use the data stream file naming token function, and automatically my data streams would be able to be named according to what their objects were, instead of being exported with, I think it would just be the PID value dot the extension. Out of the box, I really don't remember exactly how my export file name was, but I wanted to use this as well, and then it would make a lot of sense.
Great. Now, I noted that you used the term token. For those of us who may not be very familiar with that term, you know, what exactly is a token and where does it come from?
A token is a fairly simple concept that this specific string, ds file name : label, is able to be replaced by something on the back end. Will go fetch that value and replace it in the final string value that's returned. So another, maybe a good example could be some of the tokens that I use in another module that I have search analytics, but these tokens actually populate the HTML values that I'm passing to Google Analytics. And that just becomes part of the HTML. It's going to look up the facet values or the search terms that I was on. And then my Google Analytics would have the correct values that I can track specific things within Google Analytics. So in Drupal, they use tokens a lot for, I'm not certain what the biggest use is for them. I think taxonomy. I'd have to look at really what they're mostly used for in Drupal, but this goes back to the very beginning of Drupal's release.
That's wonderful. I know that this type of functionality, you had mentioned, I mean, you've been working with Drupal for a long time, so you have a really deep knowledge of a lot of the concepts, and you can see that these have come to bear in the work that you've been doing over the last 10 months. This is a very cool module.
Yeah, I should point out that this specific module does require a patch to be applied to the Islandora data stream code so that it knows to potentially look for, is there a function out there that is called create data stream file name? And if there is that function, it would use this token function to create the file name. Otherwise, it uses its built-in datastream label.mime extension.
Okay, great.
But that patch is included in the code that I have.
Yes, I think I saw that referenced very clearly in the README. And we do have links to all of the GitHub repositories where Brian has developed and is maintaining his code. So those will be available in the slides that we'll send everyone later. That's important to know. All right, so I think, why don't we move on to the next module? So Brian, I'll get you to pass back that presenter role.
Oh, certainly, yes.
All right, so this next module is called the dashboard. And so I understand you're still in the process of working on this dashboard reporting module. Would you tell us a little bit about why staff at the library are looking for this type of functionality?
Yeah, certainly. I've been asked a few times by various entities within our organization, could I run this report, or would you be able to give me a list of these objects, or we need to find all of the book pages that aren't related to books because potentially they were broken, whatever happens. So these frequent queries, it seems that in other organizations, I've seen frequently a dashboard system where people of a certain role would log into the system and everybody who is that role would get a specific dashboard. And those dashboards could contain reports or links specific to the work that they need to do. Also useful reports, it doesn't need to be work-based, but this could be just a list of objects that they might be interested in. So it just sort of came together, I think, talking with the other developer here and some of the needs coming from other people within the organization. It just started to create itself in a sense, but it was just a matter of putting together some code as well as finding some things in the community that were already there. And in this case, I think I borrowed from just the Drupal core again. The Drupal core there happens to be a really good user dashboard module. Let me go a little further. One of the reports is actually a pretty big report, but it's useful in a sense for some people that aren't really well versed with the OAI. They want to have a spreadsheet of all of the mods values for a specific type of objects. So one of the reports we have is just an export of all of the mods values. It's just running a Solr query, and it allows them to download the CSV file. So that's pretty much what it's used for here and where it started, but I can see it solidifying a little bit more, being extended by others, ideas customized, potentially having ways for specific users to add reports. Currently, some of this has to be in the code in order to hook into this module, but actually you can create a Drupal block and add it here. So it works really well with Drupal, and the ability to create an Islandora solar view that exposes a block really helps. You could create that block and then just drop it into the dashboard.
Yeah, and I think many curators of content are used to seeing this type of reporting dashboard available. I know it's been mentioned in a number of different projects, and I think this is really great. You know, you had your stakeholders mention that they had this need, and you were able to leverage things that already existed to help put something together. And I think that's the really beautiful thing about working within Drupal, is that you often don't have to recreate the wheel to provide new functionality to your stakeholders. So I think this is a great example of that.
Thanks. I would like to talk with some more curators and get more ideas, but just as far as where this can go from here, I can see their ideas really helping to build this into a much better dashboard. It's a good start, but I feel that it has a long ways to go.
Right. And I mean, speaking of that, you said that you were hoping to find collaborators. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, within our university, we've got a couple people that can work on this, but certainly working with some of the other user groups, I know that the Islandora modules, if once we've signed the contributor license, we're able to contribute back up to the community and be part of that as far as extending or adding our own ideas to existing source code. But this is a case where I really would love to have other people potentially add a great idea to this, or I'd absolutely love it if somebody could fix. There's a little bug in it where I can't quite understand why the configuration isn't always saved when you add or configure modules. If I could take over control real quick, I could show just like a minute of using the modules and configuring it. The admin would be able to set it up initially, but then that's the part where there's a bug for whatever reason. But the user can also come in and then finalize which blocks are exposed. So you can come in and move blocks around. If I want this report over on the sidebar, and I want, whichever order you want them to show up in. But then you can also pick other blocks from within the system to add them here. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, I want to show the user login screen, just as an example, to have that block show up, I can select that in the configuration page and then have that as one of my blocks that's available here. When I say customize, I can put that user login block somewhere. It's a bad example, but any block at all could be able to be shown in there. And because of the way that that block is configured, it won't show up unless it's on the right screen. So I picked a bad example, but you can see how you can just add any old block. Oh, it is. It's down here at the bottom, but it's empty.
Oh, that's great. I think I'll probably say that I see requirements for things like Google Analytics or other, metrics-based reporting. People would love to have that on a dashboard. So I could definitely see people collaborating on this type of functionality, adding new functional requirements and building it up so that it can be used by many different types of stakeholders. So that's super cool. Thank you for showing the back end.
Oops.
So we're going to do next a little bit of a retrospective. So at this point, I'll encourage participants, if you have questions that have been on your mind throughout the webinar, just to click the speech bubble icon on Join Me and type in your questions. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask a couple of retrospective questions for Brian. So I know that you haven't been working with Islandora for a very long time. Can you tell me about some of the resources that you found valuable or that you leveraged while you were kind of getting up to speed and starting your development efforts?
Sure. I think I certainly started with what we had in-house initially, definitely getting brought up to speed, the slight learning curve of how our university is set up and the various websites, the addresses, the tools, and everything here. But then in order to be able to get really into the code, rolling up my sleeves and start developing Islandora code, two of the most useful user groups are certainly the user group for the Islandora Dev and the Islandora, are they just called the Islandora User Group on Google? They're just two Google groups where many questions are answered, or if you have a question or an issue, you can certainly ask it there. I also have to say that Discovery Garden has been an invaluable resource where we have a question or an issue and we really can't throw the resources at it to address that. Aaron's team, everybody there, a fantastic job getting to the bottom of some of these more complex issues. One of the other things is the Islandora DevOps interest group, which I and one of our other developers participate in pretty actively, but it's a standard DevOps meetings where we talk about changes and issues, and just it seems to be a very stimulating conversation where everybody has good ideas and good questions. It's such a great constructive little bit of conversations in there. I do have links. You have the...
Yeah, I just wanted to get a couple examples on the screen. I'll agree with you wholeheartedly that the Google groups are really valuable. So I started with the Google groups as well. They're essentially like a listserv you can subscribe. And there's the Islandora and then the Islandora Dev are the most popular. And they have hundreds of participants, and it's really, really active. So you can expect responses, in less than a day if you post something. But I know when I first started using these Google groups, I was a lurker. So I would search the messages to see if other people had already discussed things that I'm wondering about. And then eventually you kind of work your courage up to start posting new topics and things like that. Did you find that you had a similar experience, Brian? Did it kind of start by lurking and then posting?
Absolutely. The times when I couldn't really get anything out of the source code or the comments, sometimes it's pretty complicated, flowing through code that's dynamically calling function names that are just not even the way the Drupal hooks system works. It's hard to even know what function is going to be called next because it's dynamically calling these functions. But going in here and finding a conversation that pertains to the problem that you're having, seeing the various users ask specific questions about that user's configuration or the modules that they might have installed. It's just really gets you to a greater point of understanding a lot quicker. And if you're reading one of these conversations, it certainly can light bulbs can go off when you see the answer that somebody else is getting or the way that they're thinking about it, or it really helps to understand some of the more complex things.
And I wanted to highlight also, you had mentioned the DevOps interest group. So Islandora, the community at large, which is fostered by the Islandora Foundation, they have, I would say, more than half a dozen interest groups, and the DevOps interest group is one of them. And it's really active. I think you guys meet once a month. Is that right, Brian?
Correct. If you scroll up to click on the meetings folder, that's also, it details the meeting notes on the meetings folder. So for each meeting, we have had the notes published. So you can go back and see, oh, I was at that meeting on the 18th or whatever, and I remember we were talking about tuning tricks and tips, and I really wanted to follow up with who was talking about that. So it's all sort of documented well here.
Very transparent. I know I'm a member of the Islandora Metadata Interest Group, and I find I learn something every single month when I attend. So the interest groups are really a super opportunity to get on and talk to people in many different jurisdictions. And it feels like they're just down the road or maybe just down the hall, but maybe they're across the country or in a different country altogether. So yeah, these are really wonderful resources. I'm with you on that one for sure.
How frequently does the metadata group meet? I'd like to come to that.
It's once a month as well. It's on Monday afternoon.
Okay, I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Okay, great. So the next question is a very general, this is like a big question, but could you summarize for us your experience working with Islandora? How would you describe it?
Well, first of all, like you described at the very outset, the description of Islandora, it's built upon the Drupal framework, the content management system. And Islandora is like a bunch of really powerful modules that talk to the Fedora backend. And I've been in love with Drupal for over 12 years. I've written 5 personal websites on Drupal, a couple companies that I worked for, I worked on Drupal websites. So I'm pretty familiar with the Drupal, how Drupal works. And I actually prefer that framework. If I'm going to put together another website in the future, it would be one of the websites technologies that I would consider, because Drupal is a really great tool for rapid web development. Without doing too much work, it's kind of like a WordPress, but I feel that Drupal really gives you unlimited powers if you need them. And otherwise, I really love the fact that Islandora systems they're not trying to sell products or cost people money. They're not that type of a business. It's not a bank. I don't mean to say that in a bitter way, but working for the university, it's a reward to me that I know I'm benefiting society when I do this, and I feel good about my work. I'm happy that I get to come to work every day. It's I guess that I have that perspective because of previous work where you kind of feel like you're not really helping too much with the code that you're writing. I used to work with a guy who wrote missile guidance software, and I wouldn't be able to sleep if that's what I was doing with my code and functions. But my previous work with all kinds of systems and the various database technologies sort of lends itself to being able to be productive within the Islandora framework, and I feel that that's one of the reasons I'm able to write some fairly quick modules that can extend the Islandora framework without too much effort on my part. I wanted to say one more thing. Oh, also the fact that Islandora implements Fedora, that's fantastic. I really love that. And I mean, in a computer nerdy kind of way, this is also great that it uses Solar. I've used Solar in the past, and it's just really extremely powerful. Towards the future, I think that this is extendable. But then in the coming years, I can see it being able to be modularly replaced with a different back end or a different front end, or just as time changes, it will evolve. And that's my answer for that.
No, that's wonderful. And I know that you have worked for a number of different types of organizations, so that kind of context is really really interesting for me, because I've only worked in open source, and sometimes I forget that the culture can be very different elsewhere. And the fact that you find that meaningful is, I think, it makes it even better. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So when it comes to challenges, what would be the biggest challenge working with Islandora?
to me, there are lots of little challenges along the way. Perhaps one of the most common challenges may be, how do I make the entire system do something slightly different when I know that it's somewhere buried in the code that, oh, this or that part of the screen is being affected by the code. How do I find that bit of code? Sometimes it's kind of magically defined functions within Drupal, one of these modules, or it could be a theme. There's a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to Drupal because of the various layers. So it's just a matter of knowing where to look next. If you couldn't find it in the first place you looked, I guess the challenge is to know where else to look. I think that's a small challenge. Probably some of the other challenges really pertain to being able to debug something that happened with a record in Fedora, or why is this not indexed correctly? This should be potentially searched already. I should be able to search this record. Why can't I find these objects? Things along the way. But I feel that the small challenges keep me coming back, and eventually, whenever you tackle that one challenge, you don't forget that for the next time. You just build upon it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it happens iteratively over time. And I think thinking of that, I know that you've been at it for about 10 months. At what point did you start to feel comfortable? Was it after 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, or is it never, or is it never a comfort zone?
Oh, I'm pretty comfortable. I think on the first day I was pretty comfortable, but to say that my workload wasn't very big at the very beginning, and now I'm juggling a little bit of a back burner situation. I've got too many things going on, but I'm still comfortable regardless of what's going on. I think for me, the comfort comes from previous experiences, but also the people around me here at the university. It's a comfortable place to be. And are you asking more about the learning curve comfort of being able to address a specific issue? For example, a user. Okay. Well, with that, it's a long career of working in software development. I think the pressure is, it could be more pressure here. They could add a lot more pressure, and I still would be pretty comfortable. That they don't know how much pressure some of the corporate jobs can put on you. In the end, it's just you in the software, and I feel like the computer's always going to do what the instructions tell it, and it's just a matter of sorting out the instructions, and ultimately the answer is there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
There's another question from viewer 15, and they were just wondering if there's a global calendar for when the interest groups meet. And it doesn't look like there is on GitHub, but this is something I'll follow up on. It could be on the Islandora website. And we'll send out an email later on this afternoon. And if there is a calendar, we'll include a link to it. So right now, I guess I'm unable to answer that question right now.
Yeah, I wish I could add more to that. I do know that the DevOps does the monthly thing, and with everybody who has attended, we see it on the, I think it's just a comment or an update to the actual ticket. It's in a GitHub, the interest groups, so I'm not sure though. We'll follow up and provide that information though, I'm sure.
Okay, great. There's just one other question. So what would you say to someone who might be considering Islandora versus another system? What would you want to say to them, given your experience with Islandora to date?
I would have to encourage everybody to, if it seems like this is the type of system that they need to store their digital objects. Certainly, there are other packages out there, there are other frameworks out there, and a lot of previous older implementations. I'm not familiar with too many of those because I came from a different industry, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about other systems to compare Islandora. But I can say that my own personal experience with it is I would encourage others to explore this as a certain as a solution for their needs because of the rich community, the Drupal back end, the front end. I'm sorry. The active communities in both of those. Islandora community is very active. Drupal's been very active for a lot of years, and open source. That there's just so much great. There are so many great things to say about something that's open source. Wouldn't you agree, Erin?
Absolutely. So that's all the questions that we have for right now. I know that often when I'm on the phone or on a webinar, I'll think of a question as soon as I hang up the phone or as I'm making dinner. So if you have a question later on, you can always email us at info@discoverygarden.ca. It can be a question for me or one of my colleagues. It could be a question for Brian, and I can facilitate that kind of communication after today. And before we wrap up, I do want to mention that the Islandora conference is coming. So it's going to be hosted by McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And it's happening the week of May 15th to the 19th. So it's coming up. We've included the URL on this slide. And for those of you who know you're attending, we're really looking forward to seeing you there. And for those of you who aren't sure if you can attend yet, please check it out and see if this conference is right for you. And as a final note, I do want to thank Brian so much for coming today and speaking to us about his experience. Brian, it was really wonderful to hear about the work that you've been doing.
Thank you very much, Erin. I was honored to be able to speak today, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Okay, so everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll be sending a link to the recording later on this afternoon. Take care.
Thanks.